Good afternoon, everyone. We will start our next session, which will be a session that will connect everything that's happening this week in Sao Paulo and everything that is engaging cities in the multilateral stage. And this is a session on financing for urban infrastructure to address resilience and development. The Sao Paulo Urban Summit joint session will introduce representatives from the different networks that are present these days in Sao Paulo. We come to just close a very successful Urban 20 Summit, and thanks again to our hosts in Sao Paulo for their excellent contribution to make this resound success. And we are happy now to continue the week and keep moving in this joint endeavor that Sao Paulo is hosting. For this, I have the pleasure to call on stage the Secretary General of United Cities and Local Governments, Emilia Saiz. Please, Emilia. I will call as well Mr. Adalberto Maluf, National Secretary of Urban Environment and Environmental Quality at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Brazil. I will call as well Mr. Bartolomé Diaz, Mayor of Dakar and President of Metropolis. Mr. Axel Grael, Mayor of Niterói and ICLEI Global and Regional Executive Committee member. Ms. Laurence Lavigne Lalonde, Member of the Executive Committee of Montreal. And finally, Mr. Ilan Kapperstein, C40 Cities Regional Director for Latin America. And with this, I will leave the floor to UCLG Secretary General to introduce the first part of the session.
There is one over there. Yes, there is room for everyone. I do think so. Yes. Hello again, dear colleagues. As Albert was saying, this is a special moment for us. They do deserve an applause for this dancing chairs exercise. Are we ready? I think we are ready. Good. As Albert was saying, this is a special moment in this urban summit that Sao Paulo is hosting because it is the fruition of the efforts of the different networks that are coming together. Let us recall, we are talking about, obviously, ICLEI, Metropolis, C40, and United Cities and Local Governments, with the participants of Urban 20, of course, that have been here over the past 2 days. And it's not only about bringing the actors together, it is also about talking about the issues that are pretty much at the forefront of each of the events that we are organizing. In fact, it's talking about the priorities for the cities that we represent for our constituency. We talk about the challenges of financing, but also about the great opportunities that cities have to offer. And this session is going to be looking at interesting questions, not only around the challenges on finance that we face, that cities face, but also the important role that local and regional governments networks can play, that city diplomacy can play in the access to that financing, in particular to climate financing. So the session is going to be moderated by Ilan Cooperstein, C40 Cities Regional Director for Latin America. We are going to be in very good hands. But for the opening remarks of the session, I am very pleased to give the floor to Mr. Adalberto Maluf, National Secretary of Urban Environment and Environmental Quality of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Brazil. We're so pleased to have you with us. Please join us here.
Português, inglês? English, português? Português? Tá bom. Bem, é um prazer enorme estar aqui com vocês. Queria agradecer a C40, o ICLEI.
Thank C40, ICLEI, CGLU, Metropolis, all the networks for the invitation. And we in the Ministry of the Environment, we are living a moment, experiencing a moment with a lot of solidarity with the southern region of the Rio Grande do Sul and the cities there have undergone these situations of extreme events. And they're going to be very impactful in now and in the future, and we know that cities are the ones that suffer the most with climate changes, with the increase in tropical forests, the improper management of waste and pollution. We also know that the cities are the solution for our problems. Without them, we would not get to where we need. And this multi-level governance of the federal level and local and state municipals is ever more important. We nowadays are aware that cities as a whole cannot concern themselves only with adaptation or mitigation of the effects of the greenhouse gases. We do have to change dramatically the way we live and the way we consume. And we've been working more and more with the cities to try and go from the linear economy based on fossil fuels and based on extraction and discard of materials that is not going to take to the right direction, and to reach the circular economy and a circular city that promotes circularity and also focuses on the reduction of inequality. And there is no way for us to face climate changes and challenges without making policies that are connected to solving them, and social policies as well. No wonder our President Lula, as in his third mandate, has this focus of reducing poverty, inequality, that is so important as it is as the guiding principle that we have. We know that historically, even with the levels, we can never manage to coordinate the policies. Our panel are the resources, right, Prophet Mayor Axel, to make the resources to get to the other end. But historically, we cannot coordinate the investment in the cities because we don't know exactly what we have to do. We do not have clear indicators, and the investments are not always connected to the situations that have the higher impact in the
Now, we had, a few weeks ago, President Lula in the Environment Day launched a new program called Resilient Cities. This program has in its objective integrating urban policies, climatic ones as well. This is a coordination block led by the municipalities, led by the agenda that the municipalities consider important, but articulating the work on a federal level with the state level, so that we can rethink our cities, rethink our development models, the investment for the cities, so that the investments that we're making from here onwards be to prepare our cities for resilience, extreme events, at the same time that we work towards having the cities more compact, with less energy usage, with mixed usage, with more public transportation, non-motorized transportation, reducing pollutant emission, disposable products, which our economy has grown so much, in especially plastic. And if we continue to head that way, we're going to triple production by 2060. By 2040, we're going to have more plastic in the ocean here and in the ocean. So we all have plastic here in our bloods, in our milk at the Everest Peak. So we know that development model for the cities has to change. And for that, our focus now is try to have climate finances. And we launched in the Climate Fund the first emission of green bonds, 10 billion of reais to $1 billion. And that financing will be primarily going to the energy transition, residue management, mobility. Certainly, we're going to hear from Mayor Axel, one of the leaders in climate changes. The second municipality to have a secretariat. The first one to have a secretariat dealing with climate issues in Brazil. We know that if the mayors don't lead that agenda as far as where this investment is going to, we're probably not going to be able to have these investments that reduce inequality, promote energy transition, and insertion of our economies in this new economy of the future. I think Brazil, again, have a more integrated action between different levels of the government. We know that in the recent past, the climate issue for environmental policies was not one of the priorities of the government. If, on one hand, in this first year, we're able to reduce deforestation 50%, 40% now in these 5 first months of the year, certainly this helps Brazil in its contribution for the climate issues. But our greatest challenge now is within the cities, reducing emission, especially for the climate and short-lived pollutants. Today, Brazil has ambitious targets. Our focus is implementation with the municipalities, but we need to quickly find solutions to reduce those short-lived climatic pollutants. Perhaps we need more time to focus on that. The presidency of Brazil now, this year in the G20, next year BRICS, then COP30. Certainly, we're going to try to do that, have the necessary space for the municipalities to occupy, that they are voiced, that they are listened, so that they tell us where the resources should be sent to, so that we can coordinate in a more multilateral level. We also know that the 100 billion that were promised in international negotiations to be invested, but in the developing world, hasn't arrived yet. We know that the world lives a context that is pretty complex, but we need to have those funds for adaptation, mitigation, especially in the developing world that has so many urgencies.
Well, thank you very much for these interesting inputs into our discussions and a very interesting framing. Those of you that have been following the discussions of the Urban 20 will agree that is very much in line with some of the proposals that we are making. And circular economy has come up very high in those discussions as well, because we are coming to understand how there is no way that we can detach social investment, a new way of consuming and producing, and the financing of it all. So that circularity is extremely important to articulate that. And many of our networks, and in particular I want to acknowledge ICLEI for all the work that they have done over the years around this. Another very important point is the issue of mechanisms. I want to acknowledge the presence of our colleagues from FMDB here that are trying to think with us what the best mechanisms are for city-friendly investment, basically, and to have financing reach cities. So I think this is a perfect introduction for this session. Before I hand over to Ilan, allow me to acknowledge Jordi Baquer, the Secretary General of Metropolis, and Emani Kumar, ICLEI Deputy Secretary General, also with us. They will be doing the wrapping up. I just want to make sure that to acknowledge that they are among us. Ilan, I think you have a very interesting job ahead. Good luck with that.
Hello? Okay. Thank you, Emilia. And thank you, Secretary Maluf, for these very interesting and inspiring opening words to this session. Before I start, I would like to welcome to the floor Mr. Luis Felipe Arellano, Secretary of Finance for the City of São Paulo, representing our host city, and a big climate finance leader and champion at the local level. Welcome, Secretary Arellano. I hope you have enjoyed your time here in São Paulo during the past 2 days in a very dynamic and inspiring U20 summit. And as Emilia mentioned in the last panel, there are a lot of events coming up ahead, so I hope you enjoy the upcoming days also here in São Paulo for the Urban Summit. Cities across the globe face a pressing need to address critical infrastructure issues. Rapid urbanization is putting pressure on land, energy, water, housing, sanitation, social facilities. And although committed to taking action and developing ambitious plans, cities face a massive finance gap and significant financial challenges. I listed a few that I assume our colleagues from the cities would relate, and of course we want to hear from them. But one of them, especially in the Global South, cities have limited revenue raising powers and poor credit worthiness many times, which prevent them to accessing finance. Also, many municipal governments lack the technical capacity to get projects investment ready or navigate the complex and evolving climate finance landscape. Also, subnational climate projects are often too small to meet the size requirements of multilateral development banks, for example. As well as struggling with access to private finance, cities also struggle to access public and multilateral climate finance. We heard about this in the past few days from several of our city representatives here. And as mentioned also, an estimated $4.5 to $5.4 trillion is needed to deliver local climate actions, and currently only 7 to 8% of that amount is available, not accessed, but available to cities. So the challenge is daunting, but that is why we're here, to have a collective action and to also follow one of U20's and G20's key priorities for the Brazilian government, which is the reform of the international organizations, namely multi-level, multinational, regional, and why not national development banks. So I look forward to hearing from our panel. And to begin this conversation, I would like to call on our host, São Paulo, represented here by Secretary Arellano, to share a few words with us about the challenges and, more importantly, how you have been able to find some solutions here in São Paulo.
Okay. Thank you, Ilan. Thank you, everyone, for the invitation. I'll try to speak in English, even though I'm from Brazil, because I have difficulties switching from English to Portuguese or any other language, so I think it will be easier for me. Well, we have a lot of difficulties, evidently, like every other great city, but we feel that we have also a lot of opportunities in this context that we live right now. But one thing that I believe in this first speech that I should stress is the importance of financial resilience also when we're dealing with climate financing and infrastructure resilience. And why is that? Because I believe that if you don't have financial resilience, it's a lot harder for you to leverage all this money that you will need to rebuild, to build a more resilient infrastructure, and to do all these investments that you have to do, that we all have to do in this context that we're living right now. So the first thing that I would like to point out is the importance for one city that is trying to reach those funds worldwide to first get your house organized and have some sort of financial strength or equilibrium in order for you not to feel a huge difficulty in your financial stance with the first problem that comes. Second, even though we're seeing that a lot of financiers are trying to help with their funds to have a better world, still they don't have a mandate to lose money. So projects must have their risks assessed and controlled. Unless you want to live with grants for the rest of your life as a city, you should be able to show the investors that your projects have solidity in financial terms, even though you have some risks, but those risks are somehow balanced with the opportunities and all the good things that may come from these investments. Those are just a few words to begin with the conversation, but of course, I'll be happy to share more with you in the next minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis. I will now give the floor to our next speaker, Mayor of Dakar and President of Metropolis, Barthélémy Dias.
Merci. Peut-être avec votre permission, I'm just going to read in French because the translation will be in English. And I would like probably the people to be able to understand what I'll be talking about. And French is my official language, so I do not have the right to speak in another language. And I hope that you guys would understand that situation. Voilà, donc avant de commencer, j'aimerais remercier d'abord les co-organisateurs de cette session, Cité, gouvernements locaux, Unis, le C40, ICLEI et Metropolis, pour le choix de notre sujet d'aujourd'hui. Je voudrais dire que le financement des infrastructures urbaines est aussi urgent qu'important. Et nous devons cesser de le considérer comme un sujet uniquement local et en parler comme l'un des défis mondiaux déterminants de notre époque, qui peut conditionner la vie de millions, voire de millions de personnes dans l'avenir. Dans un monde qui s'urbanise rapidement et qui doit le faire de manière beaucoup plus durable, les infrastructures urbaines sont essentielles pour relever 3 défis connexes. Le premier défi est celui du développement. Les villes en particulier, les grandes métropoles, sont des moteurs de croissance, des espaces où le potentiel humain peut être maximisé grâce aux avantages de l'échange, de la collaboration et de l'échelle. Mais une urbanisation rapide, non planifiée et manquant de ressources peut entraver le potentiel économique de la ville et sa qualité de vie pendant des décennies. Dans beaucoup de nos villes, les travailleurs les plus productifs restent assis pendant des heures dans les embouteillages, chaque jour, gaspillant ainsi un immense potentiel économique. L'activité économique est ralentie et le bien-être des citoyens diminue. Tandis que les coûts de santé liés à la pollution de l'air et de l'eau, aux accidents de la circulation, au bruit et à d'autres risques ne cessent d'augmenter. Tout cela est la conséquence directe d'une infrastructure urbaine inadéquate.
Of inadequate urban infrastructure, underinvestment in the early stages of urban growth, and the lack of resources to maintain infrastructure generate costs that the city and its inhabitants continue to pay, eating up precious resources. This is a vicious cycle of urban underdevelopment that must be broken. The informal settlements, poorly built roads, irregular waste dumps, or badly maintained water infrastructure of today would be many times more expensive to fix after a decade or more of rapid growth. We need to find ways to front-load urban investments where they are most urgent and needed. And I am convinced that economic benefits of better urban infrastructure will pay for themselves very quickly. The second challenge is sustainability. We cannot continue building nowadays cities that are growing fast and at pace the same way that other big cities in the world did in the past. We need building technologies and materials that emit less CO2 to build sufficient housing, commercial, and public buildings. Those technologies are available, affordable, and they're most needed. We need to incorporate energy efficiency, low-carbon mobility, urban density, nature-based solutions, other features that will make our cities less dependent on fossil fuels and less polluted in the future. Porto Alegre, with the floods that took place there, pointed out all the fragility that the city deals with unprecedented scales. Again,
En ce qui concerne le changement climatique, je voulais dire que l'Afrique est déjà le continent le plus touché.
talking about climate change, Africa is already the most affected continent by climate change, and so are its cities. Africa is also the continent that is least responsible for climate change, and those inhabitants have benefited the least, benefit by the industrial and consumer economy that causes climate change. But Africa is also a land of opportunity. A latecomer to urbanization, it is in Africa that most new urban infrastructure will need to be built in the coming decades. We have the chance to build better, to address the challenges of development, sustainability, and resilience early on. There's hope that we can do better, and this hope lies, to a large extent, in the continent of the youngest cities, Africa. The current discussions about loss and damage and how to make up for the negative effects of climate change to those who are most affected by it opens an important perspective. From the urban perspective, the stakes are crystal clear. A rapid increase in available resources is urgent, and we want to come in urban boom in Africa to be part of the solution, rather than be a new contributor to climate change. I have myself taken the initiative to start a conversation with my peers, mayors of African metropolities and capitals. My African colleagues and I are working this initiative. But we need welcoming attitude at the other side to increase available funds and open new mechanisms that are diagnosed not only for states. Conclusion. I'm convinced the mechanism for international funding on climate action and climate justice will grow and improve in the coming years. If arguments of justice and global fairness are not convincing enough, then we can end that Africa and other lower and middle-income countries offer a huge financial potential for business and development. I will leave you this message. You find a willing partner in the mayors and local councils in Africa. Urbanization is an opportunity for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I now invite Axel Grael, Mayor of Niterói, and member of ICLEI Global and Regional Executive Committee, to share some words.
Bom, muito obrigado. Vou falar em português para que a gente fique aqui com uma
Portuguese,
bem eclética. E eu quero
take a round table here.
saudar aqui as
I'd like
pessoas que estão
to
conosco
salute
na frente,
those who are here with us here,
nos assistindo.
also those
Nós
who are
temos
attending the event.
tema bastante
This topic is
instigante,
very
de
instigating,
certa forma, muito
in a way,
preocupante no momento
very
atual.
worrisome
Eu,
in current days.
fui apresentado aqui
As I was introduced here by Ilan,
prefeito da
I am the
cidade
mayor
de Niterói,
of the city of Niterói in the metropolitan area of Rio de Janeiro. I am the vice president for
da Frente Nacional de Prefeitos,
National Front of Mayors.
então,
So it's a collective of more than 400 municipalities, the largest municipalities in Brazil.
Sou também do Comitê Regional.
Also, I'm part of the Regional Committee for ICLEI and the Global Committee. So
Dessa multilevel, né, que a
we
gente
can really talk about the multi-level,
ultimamente.
which we've been discussing extensively recently. and also with a local perspective.
Começar pelo,
However,
assim, pela
I'd like to
instância
start
global.
with, so to speak, the global instance,
Agora, há poucos dias
because a few days ago,
acompanhando e participando
I was
da conferência
part of
em Bonn,
the Bonn conference,
uma conferência
a
preparatória,
preparatory conference for our next COP, which is
Baku, no Afeganistão,
the
desculpe, no Azerbaijão.
the Azerbaijan COP that will take place.
E o tema, né,
The topic for
conferência
the next conference
financiamento,
is
né, para
funding
a transição climática.
for the climate
Eu
transition.
fiquei muito preocupado porque
I was really
nós
concerned
avançamos muito pouco.
because we have advanced very little there.
Nós sabemos, né,
We
que a
know
construção
that
desses acordos é
the
sempre muito
construction
trabalhosa,
of those
mas
agreements
eu tive
are
a
always very
sensação que
onerous,
nós estávamos,
but I had the sensation
pouco
that
preparados,
we
né,
were
para
not
um
ready
sucesso,
enough for
né,
a
no
successful
final desse
gathering
ano. E
at
se
the end of this
nós
year.
não tivermos, né,
And
sucesso
if
em
we are not
debater
successful
o financiamento,
in
né,
debating
para a transição
funding
climática,
for the climate
a COP
transition,
seguinte, né, que vai ser
the
em
following
Belém,
COP,
vai discutir,
which will take place in the city
os
of
novos
Belém
compromissos,
to
né,
discuss
dos países
the new
com relação
commitments
à
of the
questão,
countries
climática, serão
in
muito
climate
pouco
issues,
ambiciosos.
we're
E
very
nós sabemos que
little
não dá mais
ambitious.
tempo, né, não dá mais
And we
tempo
know
para que a
we don't
gente
have enough
fique
time
perdendo tempo.
anymore
Nós estamos
to
vendo o
simply
que está
waste
acontecendo
time.
aqui no Rio
We
Grande
see
do Sul,
what's
né, que
happening now
acabou de
in the
passar por
state
uma
of
grande
Rio Grande do
calamidade,
Sul that just went through a huge climate calamity. The news today is that river levels are rising once again. If I'm not mistaken, it's the fifth flood in the last 6 months. In other words, it's a situation that it's proving to be reoccurring. We see now in the Amazon dry rivers. We see bushfires in the Pantanal region, and around the world we see lots of consequences deriving from climate change, and we're not able to reach an agreement when it comes to the transition funding. My feeling, as I see what's happening in those conferences, and I've always participated since the first conferences, being part of the discussion back at Rio 92. My impression is that all the lobbies did their work, and it's as a boxing match when they clinch and they hang on to the other, and if the referee doesn't separate them, well, the fight will not carry on. And that's where we are. We're clinching climate-wise. And I think one of the ways that we have to get out of this clinch is to bring new social actors for the discussion table. And the cities, I believe, have an essential role in that. The progress that we had at the Dubai conference with the approval of Trump, there was some light at the end of the tunnel. But we need that light to shine even brighter so that we can gain some speed in this process. Then, I think this is one of the main concerns that I have in the global landscape. On a national scale here in Brazil, finally, I think we were able to recover our ability to dialogue with the cities or the municipalities and the federal government. We see now multiple initiatives and new sources of funding for the actions of the municipalities, and that brings us lots of hope to all of us. I agree with our Secretary of the State of São Paulo that the cities cannot live on grants. We cannot depend on those occasional sources of funding, because we need that the flow of resource take place more regularly. Something that perhaps our foreign visitors, perhaps are not as informed about it, but Brazil has just undergone a fiscal reform, and I'm very skeptical regarding the results of that fiscal reform. Because for many decades, there was such an effort in decentralizing tax collection, decentralization financially for the municipalities. And the Brazilian Federation is a federation that comprises both municipalities and the states. And now this new reform concentrates the tax collection on a federal level, which will allow us to go back to old times when we had difficulties which we already have today. In other cases, for example, the state VAT, which is a tax on goods that's collected on a state level today. There are lots of concerns about how those taxes and resources will go back to the municipalities and where they came from. So now we're going to once again have this problem on a national level, since Brazilian Congress recently passed this law towards centralizing everything on a federal level. The resources, they're not enough. We're not ready to deal with disasters as we saw in Rio Grande do Sul and Pantanal, bushfires in many different parts of the country, bushfires in natural vegetation, bringing lots of consequences to the local economy. We do not have enough funds. We don't have budget provision to allow people's lives to go back to normal more quickly. And the Brazilian landscape, considering the demands of those who are going through those hardships. Not only that, but also have governmental practices, tendering laws that take way too long. We need to find a way to make things easier as we address those who are in need, the families, and so on. And the National Front of Mayors, I am chairing a permanent commission for the cities that were struck by disasters. And we have had this very debate to, by the way, having solidarity collaboration between cities for us to have more agile ways to rescue those who are in need in such situations. Something that we also see on all levels is that it's not always easy for information to reach the cities, especially the smaller towns, those who are less structured. When we talk about fund availability, there are funds that, although they might not be enough for all the demand, but still, the funds won't get there. There's difficulty in accessing those funds. Oftentimes, the path to it are extremely bureaucratic. And also, quite often, it's so hard to reach those funds that it's only worth if you bring to the funds a really fundraising, because it's the same work. Fundraising for a smaller project or fundraising for a bigger project, it's the same thing. And the bigger project needs, theoretically, much more planning, much more articulation, and in instances such as that I'm mentioning now, the National Front of Mayors, this could help. We're here discussing different organizations that bring cities together. I think they can help in that process as well. But here's the fact. Today, we have funds, we have the resources, but we don't have the projects. On the other hand, sometimes cities have projects, but they cannot access those funds. But anyway, this is just an initial reflection on that topic. If we have time for a debate later on, well, we're willing. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I would now like to invite, last but not least in this round, Ms. Laurence Lalonde, a member of the Executive Committee and Deputy Mayor of Montreal.
Is it working? Yes. Bonjour tout le monde. Moi aussi, je tiens à mon français, alors je tiens à vous saluer tous et toutes en français. I didn't know there was a translation from French to English. I would have prepared to do it in French. Just a second. Yes. Well, obviously, there's maybe a different perspective from a city from the north, obviously. We have different challenges, but we are still facing a lot of impact of climate change already. We have a lot of fires, a lot of flooding, even if in the city of Montreal every year we had a lot of flooding. And so we still, even if we have more money, maybe more capacity, we are still facing those challenges, and we don't have all the tools that we need to react and to act. As the mayor of Dakar said, we also have, I think, a greater responsibility to accelerate the actions that needed to take place worldwide to mitigate to reduce the greenhouse gas emission and to find solutions to those to make sure that our territories are more resilient. So with this bigger responsibility and this need to accelerate, I think, faster than maybe other part of the world, we also need resources, and I think we are all struggling to find the resources to all the projects that we have, because we do have a lot of projects, but we do not have the funding to do our project most of the times. And we can rely on different sources of money. Obviously, as a city, we are dependent a lot of subsidies from the provincial or federal national government that are not sufficient. We need more than those subsidies, and all the cities in the countries are fighting once against each other to have access to those fundings. But moreover, also those programs are really, really strict and not flexible, and it's really difficult for the cities to make sure that our project, what we do in Montreal, maybe not the same thing as they do in Brampton, that was here also with us, or as they do in other cities in Montreal. So those programs are really, really strict, and it's difficult for the cities to make sure that. So we need more flexibility in our program in our country, but I think in general with the programs that are available for cities or for national for countries, we need more flexibility to be able to represent our own reality when we are looking for money for our project. And also, I really do believe that we need to think more in long-term program. Most of the time, it's a few years, but projects are. If we really want to have an impact, we have to work in a long-term scale. It's easier for us to have an impact and show the impact of what we are implementing if we can show it for a few years. And so this is, I think, something that needs to be addressed at a different level. In a city like Montreal, in the city of the North, we are really facing there's an increase in the cost of living that is we haven't seen that in decades. So it's really, the cost of living is increasing really fast. And this is all that has an impact, obviously, on the services that we can offer to the citizens, but it also have an impact on our capacity to raise taxes. And because if I just take transportation, for example, in the city of Montreal, the transportation is paid 1/3 by the city of Montreal, 1/3 by the government, and 1/3 by the users of the public transit. And we have a lot of a big deficit due to COVID and other reasons. And now if we want to maintain the services, if we want to develop the services so we can have less dependence to solo cars and develop the network, we cannot only rely on increasing the price of public transit, because the rent are higher, the grocery is higher. So if we just rely on increasing the cost, we are going to have more people that are in vulnerable situation. And even in a rich city as Montreal, we are seeing a lot of people struggling with the rent, struggling with housing. We have the homelessness is rising as well. So we cannot rely on those kind of taxation that we could rely in the past, but now it's not an option anymore. So we really do, as I mentioned yesterday in another panel, we try to use our money wisely. So every capital work program, every investment that we do in Montreal, we try to focus on achieving our climate change and objective, and make sure that we are focusing on natural-based solution, and everything is to help us achieve our objectives. But we also are really focused as well with bringing all the economic sector aware of our objectives. We want them to be part of the solution, so we are really working hard with public sector and financial sector as well, and philanthropic sector, so they can all join us in different network, so they can work with us to achieve our goals and go faster. Yeah, that's it for now.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you all for this wonderful and very rich discussion. I take a lot of conclusions and learnings from this. I understand from what Secretary Arellano and also Vice Mayor Lalonde mentioned, there's a lot that cities need to do to spend money wisely, to create resilience, as Mayor Diaz said, but we definitely see that cities already know the job they have to do. As Mayor Grael mentioned, as we all know, national negotiations at the national level are almost maddeningly slow compared to the speed with which we need to work. But the message, I think, from all of those logos here of some of the main networks of cities is that we need to raise a collective voice to try to change this. And the message of hope comes, I think, from Secretary Maluf. You've been on this side, working in a city, working in a city network. Now you're working in the federal government, trying to bridge that. So I think there is a message of hope, of a collective voice, and getting more countries, nations like Brazil, listening to the subnational governments and increasing climate finance and other resources at the speed that is needed, which is a huge challenge. But I take a huge amount of lessons from this. So thank you. Before we go, I would like to call Emilia back to the stage to invite our speakers that will conclude the session.
Well, thank you very much, Ilan, and thank you also, and applause to you for the good work as moderator of this. But also an acknowledgement to the work that C40 is doing. You know, this is a network of those cities that are putting climate as a priority, and that is trying to accelerate and drive transformative action. I think that is the example that we want to bring through this joint session, is that all of our networks have a meaningful contribution to the collective agendas of cities, also to the individual agendas. And I hope that you can all sense that we are all part of that very same community. So we have a responsibility there in changing narrative, changing minds, and promoting transformation. I am now very pleased to invite to join us and to give some concluding remarks to ICLEI Deputy Secretary General, Emani Kumar. ICLEI is a sister city in all the expression of the word. We share a soul because ICLEI was emerged from one of the founding organizations of United Cities and Local Governments. And so we understand municipalism in a very similar way, and associativism in the same way. ICLEI has been talking about circular economy and tackling climate change at a moment when nobody was doing that, and I think it's worth reminding us. And you are at the forefront of trying to organize our constituency when we go to the multilateral system, in particular around COP. So it is a great pleasure for us to have you here, your Congress in a couple of hours, and to have you here in this session. Thank you for joining us at this very busy time, Kumar.
Thank you, Emilia, and thanks to all the reflections here on the stage. I don't know what I should conclude, because a lot of statements are really given a direction. What needs to be done, starting from, I think, what he said. We need to look into spending money on activities, and from where should we get the money on that. So there are maybe 1 or 2 points. I don't want to take too much of time. I know that at 5 o'clock we are supposed to close it, and I have one more speaker after me. But 2 things which I just want to add here, what every speaker has said already, and I think this point is very clearly what came up from the Brazil, from our gentleman here, is that unless until cities take money from their own pockets and start spending on the climate activities. I think that's one thing even the mayor was talking about. If you want to prove that you are acting on that, so what I always say that is, as cities should take money from your own pocket and start spending, maybe it's 5%, 10% or 20% from your own sources of funding, so that the others can come, either state governments or national governments or MDBs or private sector participation and all these things. So that's one message. I'm in this field for the last 25 odd years, and talking to the city governments, working with the city governments. So that's one point I just want to add here, in addition to what they have done, other speakers are talking about. The other thing recently, which we were working on the developing countries side, in one of the country, it's called Dhaka city in Bangladesh, which is next to the country where I live in India. Along with C40, we have come out with the climate action plans, and we have released those climate action plans. And one interesting thing happened during that, and the Minister of Environment from Bangladesh has clearly told to us, both to ICLEI and C40 and also to the city of Dhaka, can you include your climate actions into the NDC 3.0, which most of the countries are supposed to bring, supposed to deliver by next year, by February, March next year on that. So what his suggestion is that if you can bring your climate actions, the city level climate actions linking to the NDC, so what it happens is, because the national ministries are really putting money through either housing ministry or a transport ministry or other ministries. So there is a way to allocate some funding for these actions. So that's one thing, is securing funding from the national governments or provincial governments, because the taxes and all what you are talking about. So there is a mechanism to bring money to the city governments to take it forward on that. The other thing is, because I think most of the speakers they're talking about is that, yes, financial institutions are telling us for the last so many years, they have money, and what our mayor is saying that, yes, we have, the cities are also saying, yes, we have the projects, but there is still gap between these financial institutions and these city governments. So how do we fulfill that gap? Is one example again is the NDC. What I'm saying that is, not only these governments, national governments and other private sectors, but to multilateral development banks, MDBs, if they want to allocate funding and they want to give funding for these projects, for these actions, they need a sovereign guarantee. So where will they get the sovereign guarantee? If you include it into the NDC on that. So this is another way I'm saying that bringing our climate actions, linking to the NDC, or putting into the NDC, so even the MDBs can also come and invest into these projects because there is a national government guarantee on the NDC. At least the commitment is there from the national government and take it forward on that. So that's the second point which I just want to add as a conclusion here. My last one point is, I think with all our partners, C40, ICLEI, Metropolis, UCLG, in COP28 we have launched or with support from Bloomberg, the CHAMP is launched, the Climate Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnership. I think there are more than 80 odd countries who are already joined in that, and most of them are more than 50% are from the developing countries who joined this CHAMP, which is becoming, I will say, that is another vehicle or another instrument to support the city governments with support from the national governments, because the national governments are really committed a multi-level partnership. So by addressing the CHAMP or by including the CHAMP, the city governments linking those climate actions to NDC, and through CHAMP, all our partners here, we are happy to support the countries to include these local level actions to the NDC on that. So these are the 3 points I thought that maybe I just want to add in addition to what they all have said. But it's all in our hands, all the city governments, how we want to address, how we will take it forward is in our own hands actually. Nobody is going to come and help us out there so to take it forward on that. So thank you again for giving me this opportunity, and I hope we will get, our local governments will get some money to address these climate actions. Thank you, thanks a lot.
Well, thank you very much for the wise words, but also for those very practical experiences that you have shared with us in closing. And if there are a couple of things that I would like to add there is, I think the guarantee issue is very, very important. And in the Urban 20 communique, we are calling for a city guarantee funds, and we are starting to work with some development banks to see how that can actually happen, and with some donors, among others, the European Union, and very interesting national determined contributions. But we haven't talked here about the Loss and Damage Fund and the access to the Loss and Damage Fund. At some point, we will need to bring that into the equation as well. And now time for one of our own, my dear colleague. He lives above me in the city of Barcelona, Metropolis. Is our proud metropolitan section, and we share an office together. By the way, also with C40. There are many colleagues from C40 that are now in our same building. Jordi, you are invited to close this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Emilia, and thanks everyone, all the panelists, for this inspiring session. We started with a musical chairs game, just as a warm-up. And I think we end with so many ideas and concepts, this dramatic transformation that Secretary Malouf was talking about, for example, or I loved, for example, the image of the clinch, like the boxing clinch, and how do we need to disentangle this situation with climate. There's I think we're vindicated when Metropolis approached the organizers of U20, actually at the inspiration of Sao Paulo, to say, let's talk about what city networks can do, must do in this important issue. And a lot of what has been said here really proves that this idea, the idea that as we now have understood the enormous cost of the climate transition, and as we're now getting ready in some ways to mobilize these resources in the private, no one talked about private, but in the private and in the public sector, we cannot underestimate how important it is that local authorities are at the center of this new reallocation of resources, which must be massive. And if it is not massive, we will not meet the challenge. That we all know. How do we place ourselves at the center? And one way we do this is together, right? So when Emilia Saiz talks about working together in networks and between networks, one needs to listen to her, because she and her organization have been at the center of the organized constituency of the U20 and of being in the COPs, of talking to the United Nations and of the Global Task Force, all these mechanisms that bring us together. And we need champions, and we need mayors like the mayor of Dakar or the mayor of Niteroi, these mayors that champion the cause and that bring it forward. All of these brings me to some conclusions I wanted to very quickly outline. And we know the local is indispensable, but what we also understand at this point is that the cities and the city networks are constantly battling a paradox. Everyone now, when we arrive at their gates, they say, you're super important. Yes. Cities are crucial. We want you. Any big organization who will organize a big event on climate, by the way, also many other things, will want cities there, right? We want mayors, come, just talk a little bit, the sort of local color. Very few, though, are assessing themselves. Are we ready for what this transformation means in terms of going local? There's a constant call for cities to develop capacities. Yes, do that, please, cities. Develop capacities. But if the other side, if the big corporations, if the philanthropies, if the multilateral donors, if the bilateral development players, if national governments are not ready to re-examine their own procedures, their own standard way of doing things, they'll never meet with the needs of local authorities. Therefore, I believe we must do a constant reminder, constantly be banging at the door and saying, if you really believe in this transformation, starting in the local place, you need to transform these mechanisms. We in City Networks know the efforts that are invested, and I must say many times wasted by the cities, to navigate Byzantine structures, impossible requirements of national governments, of international organizations for cities to access funding. I think it's time to call all these organizations on their discourse, on their narrative that cities are important, and to say, well, if they are, what are you doing so that this funding is accessible? I will end up quoting my president, the president of Metropolis also, when he says, and remember, local does not mean small. Local could be small or it could be very big. If every time that we go local, we go with peanuts, then we're not going to meet the challenges at the scale that's needed. There are cities the size of countries. There are local authorities that need levels of investment that no one at this point is ready to offer. And without this, we're just going to do pilots, demonstration, show it's possible, but not actually do this. So I join everyone in this panel in saying that it is urgent, and that it's urgent that we, in this shift, in this global realization, that we need much more resources, we need also a fairer distribution of resources, loss and damage, right? in this global shift, we put local not at the footnote, not at the nice to have, but at the very center. Thank you very much. And also with this, thanks to all the partners for this session and to our two co-moderators, Emilia and Ilan.